Hello, missional community friends. This is Eric Robinson. I'm so excited to share the last part of the three-part series on story. So we've been talking about how a missional community does four things. We pray together, we love one another, we do acts of mercy, and we evangelize our neighbors. How do we evangelize our neighbors? Well, I'm putting forth this acronym that I learned from a book called B.L.E.S.S. And B.L.E.S.S stands for begin with prayer, listen to your neighbors, eat with them, serve your neighbors, and share your story with the neighbors. And that last part, sharing your story, I've gone over how to share your story. What was your life before, during, and after receiving Jesus Christ in the Eucharist? Sharing the story, how we were created out of love, we were captured by the devil, we were rescued by Jesus Christ, and our response is to become Catholic and enjoy Him in the sacraments and live a life of faithful discipleship. And now I want to share with you how to share short stories or parables. You know, Jesus spoke in parables because it really could resonate with people on how to, in a way that they could relate to. And so there are three parables I want to share with you, modern parables, that I think are helpful when talking about certain aspects. So I use these all the time when I talk with people. The first parable, we could call it the parable of the gas station. The parable of the gas station. And I learned this from someone else, so don't give me credit for this. So the parable of the gas station is basically a parable about the nature of freedom. And I often use this when I talk about the sin of contraception or other sexual immoral behavior, but it can also be used just in general with how to have true freedom. Because America views freedom as doing whatever you want, and that's not true freedom. True freedom is doing what you ought. True freedom is growing in virtue. And so this is a parable about that. There were two people that went to the gas station. They both had unleaded vehicles, and one of them approaches the gas station and says, you know what? I want to do whatever I want. I'm going to pump my car with diesel fuel today. The other person goes to the gas station and says, my car has a design to it. I'm going to restrict my freedom. I'm only going to pump it with the unleaded fuel today. And then we'll see what happens. Well, what happens? Well, the person that pumped their car with diesel and the person that pumped their car with gas, which one is now more free? It's the one that actually followed the design, and now they can drive wherever they want. The one that pumped their car with diesel, their engine is shot and they have to get it replaced and they can't travel hardly anywhere. So also, when we follow God's design for our life, for the body, for sexuality, for morality, when we follow His ways, we are actually way more free. When we do whatever we want, we end up crashing, and it's not a road that is good. It's a road that leads to destruction. And those who enter by it are many. And so that is a parable of the gas station. Once again, that can be used for just describing the nature of freedom, the nature of why we would follow God instead of ourselves. And it can be used for a lot of things. So that's the parable of the gas station. Here's another parable. This is the parable of the police officer. And this one, I pretty much always use it when I talk to my Protestant brothers and sisters about the Eucharist. Because in the Protestant world, there is actually a lot of movement towards believing that something is actually really there in the Eucharist, that it's not just a symbol, that really is Jesus. But often people divorce the real presence of Christ from authority, and that's a problem. We need to actually have a way where we can show that the authority of the church really matters when it comes to the Eucharist. Which St. Ignatius of Antioch, he was a disciple of the Apostle John, the beloved disciple. And Ignatius of Antioch in 107 AD says that there is no valid Eucharist apart from a valid bishop in apostolic succession, basically. And so there's only one valid Eucharist. It's when there's a bishop that's a valid bishop, or someone who he himself designates to confer the Eucharist, which would be the priest. And so outside the authority of the Catholic Church, or the Orthodox as well, because they have retained apostolic succession, there is no actual Eucharist. So even if you believed all that you wanted to, that this Eucharist in your Protestant church is Jesus, that doesn't change the reality. And here's how you can explain that in a way that's non-threatening and that makes a lot of sense. So I am Eric, and I'm not a police officer, right? I'm the director of evangelization for Light of the World. And so if I were to come to you and say, Steve, you are under arrest, would you actually be under arrest? No. And in fact, if you pretended that you were under arrest, that'd be a little weird. That would not be good. Now let's say I dress up like a police officer, and then I say, you are under arrest. Would you still be under arrest? No. Now if I were an actual police officer sanctioned by the state, and I said, you are under arrest, now your whole reality just changed. Your reality just changed like that. You were not under arrest, but then I spoke words, you're under arrest, with authority, and now your world has changed. So also, when the priest in the person of Jesus Christ says, this is my body, it becomes his body. When I, a lay person, or a Protestant pastor, not in apostolic succession, if they say, this is my body, it means nothing. It doesn't actually become the body of Christ. Because words spoken without the authority doesn't change reality. It's when words and authority are together, that's what changes reality. And so when God says, let there be light, there is light. When Jesus says, this is my body, it is his body. And when a priest in the person of Jesus Christ under apostolic succession, under their bishop says, this is my body, it becomes his body. Okay, so those are the first two parables: gas station, police officer, freedom, Eucharist. And the last one is about being reconciled to the church. You know, oftentimes people come to us that are maybe like they have like an annulment situation come up, and they can't quite, they can't get baptized right away, or they can't receive the Holy Eucharist yet because they have to go through this process of the annulment process, this healing process. And so this is how I explained it one time to someone, and it really resonated with this person, because this person was like, "Wait, I don't understand why I can't do this." You know, actually, I'm going to switch the parable up to. Actually, there's another parable that I'll say. I'll do 4 parables. All right, the third one is this. So when you first break a leg and you go to the hospital to get the medicine that you need, the medicine feels really good. Let's say it's morphine or something, and you feel like, oh, I feel good about this. So also when you first come to the Catholic Church and maybe you experience something good and you don't realize you have to go through this whole annulment process, you feel good about becoming Catholic. But then you find out about the annulment process and you're like, wait, what? I don't want to have to go through all of this. Why do I have to jump through all these hoops? Well, it's because you have a broken leg, and now it's time to rehabilitate it, and that takes time. And it takes PT, physical therapy. And so months may go by, even years may go by, where you're gradually working those muscles, you're gradually working that leg. The bone is actually healing. It's going to be stronger than it was before. And it's not like the morphine kick that you got when you first came to the hospital. And it's going to be hard, and it's going to be arduous, but it's going to be worth it in the end. So that's one parable. The other parable I often use is people often don't understand, why can I not receive the Eucharist right away? Why do I have to go to confession first? Or why do I have to jump through all those hoops? And this is the parable of marriage. Marriage is a great parable for this. So the Eucharist is the most intimate exchange that is possible between us and God on this side of heaven. It's where Jesus Christ, the bridegroom, gives himself to the bride in a one flesh union. So this is very intimate and deep and good. And Jesus does desire every person to receive him in the Eucharist. However, he only has one bride, the church. And so it's kind of like marriage. When I was dating my wife, it would have been inappropriate if we were only dating for me to go ahead and have sex with her. Because sex is the renewal of marriage vows. Sex is the total gift of oneself to the other and a reciprocal gift of self. So the man gives himself totally to his wife. The wife gives herself totally to the man. And this is a total gift of self. So it's like, not only am I giving you myself now, I'm giving you my future, I'm giving you my fatherhood, I'm giving you my potential fatherhood, I should say. I'm giving you even my future, like till death do I part. So sex before marriage is wrong because sex itself is a renewal of marriage vows. It's expressing with your body what you've already said with your lips, which is, I will love you till death do us part. And if you haven't said that, then you're speaking a lie with your body. So also the Eucharist, before actually fully coming into the Catholic Church, is a lie. Because you are saying, I give my whole self to Christ. Christ gives his whole self to you, but you haven't actually made that covenant with him in that one bride, the Catholic Church, that he has established. And so, and I'm not talking about the Orthodox do have a valid Eucharist, but it's still not fully proper because they're not in union with Peter, with the Pope, with the church that Christ himself established. And so if you come from a different denomination, like any Protestant denomination, you can't just receive Jesus in the Eucharist. That's like having sex before marriage because you haven't fully been initiated into the bride of Christ. And so I often use that analogy or that parable when it comes to not being able to receive communion right away. Don't worry, Jesus does want to give his whole self to you, but it has to be done in proper order. So you date Jesus, that's good. Maybe you get engaged to Jesus, that's great. But then you can only receive Jesus Christ in the Eucharist when you are married to Jesus and are faithful to that marriage. So if you break that marriage covenant along the way, you also can't just receive the Holy Eucharist. You actually need to go to confession first to be restored to that relationship. And so all of this is meant to promote this deep, deep intimacy that God does want for each and every person. So hopefully those parables are helpful in providing some sort of framework for how you can tackle some of these modern issues. The parable of the gas station, what true freedom is. The parable of the police officer, the Eucharist with authority. The parable of the broken leg and healing process for that annulment process. And the parable of marriage and sexuality in regards to Christ and the Eucharist and himself given to the church. So hopefully these parables help as you engage your neighbors in rich conversation, and hopefully these help you, spur you on to evangelize in a way that's effective and fruitful. God bless.